when great white sharks come out of the blue.
And then all of a sudden, I just got hit from behind. Yeah, he was thrashing, you know, just...
Survivors are left with horrific stories to tell.
The shark was shaking my board around like a dog with a bone. And I took a few strokes and then just realized that the water was red all around me and I was losing a lot of blood.
This sharkbite injury was a guillotine-type amputation in that it went straight through skin, muscle, and bone. There wasn't even a ragged edge.
In places such as South Africa and California, just to swim in the sea is to risk an attack.
It's like this paralyzing fear and you can't move. And it was like foam and blood and thrashing and you just couldn't see what was what and what was who. And I just sat there and stared.
But what do we actually know about great whites and why they attack humans? What can the survivors really tell us? Surfers from all over the world would give their eye teeth to play in these waves off South Africa. But Andrew Carter is lucky. He lives here and has surfed here all his life.
The thrill and the exhilaration you get from riding waves and getting tubed, riding inside the wave, there's another sport that gives me that extreme sort of thrill.
But one day, getting that thrill nearly killed him. Andrew and his friend Bruce Corby had been surfing together for years, and that day at the local beach felt no different from any other. But it was different.
We paddled out the back of the point together, and we were sort of probably surfing furthest out that day. We were right out the back.
But the farther they got from shore, the closer they were to danger. South Africa has one of the biggest populations of the world's biggest meat-eating fish, the great white shark. Andrew and Bruce were now over 300 feet out, and without realizing it, in great white territory. A shark was patrolling.
And we must have been in the water around 10 to 15 minutes or so, and we'd had a few waves. Just lifted me clean out the water and then pulled me down under the waves and shook me around. And when I came back at the surface, I obviously realized it was a big shark. There was just an unbelievable force, almost like being in a vice. My bones, my leg felt like they were snapping.
Andrew was seriously injured. His thigh was pouring blood.
I remember thinking that, you know, this is not happening to me. You know, this is something that you read about. This is a horror story that's in somebody else's life.
He thought the shark was finished, but it wasn't. When it came back, he used the only thing he had to fend it off.
As I fell, I pushed the board to my left, and when the shark grabbed again, I wasn't there, and the board was there, so the second bite was my board.
While Andrew and the shark wrestled over the surfboard, Bruce, nearly 100 feet away, was unaware of what was happening.
And then I was lying in the water. The shark was shaking my board around like a dog with a bone. And I took a few strokes and then just realized that the water was red all around me and I was losing a lot of blood. So I stopped and turned around, and as I turned around, I saw the shark letting go my board and slipping back underneath the waves.
When the shark dropped the board, Andrew grabbed what was left of it and paddled for his life. The shark was still there. Bruce, meanwhile, was casually paddling back to shore.
And he paddled right through where I was attacked, and the shark must have come back to the surface, seen I wasn't there, and then gone for the next movement, which was unfortunately him. Pretty much swam right on top of him and then bit down and took his leg off in a bite.
It was a horrible injury, but there was only one thing Bruce could do: keep paddling. He had over 300 feet to go. As for Andrew,
I think even then, if I wasn't 100% sure whether I was going to live because I was losing so much blood, the shark bit me on probably the biggest piece of meat of my body, which is from my hip to my knee. And according to the doctors that did the operation, they said there wasn't any other place that could have bitten me. You know, if it had bitten me a bit lower, it would have taken the leg off. If it had bitten me a bit higher, it would have got internal organs. So I was incredibly lucky that it only got me in that position.
and Bruce?
I was lying on my back getting help by my friends, and I looked across, and a couple of meters away Bruce was lying getting help from other people as well, and he didn't look like he was in a good way. Bruce then passed out from loss of blood. They got his heart beating again, but he never regained consciousness. And this continued on in the car park until the ambulances came. And unfortunately, he was kept alive for 7 or 8 hours, but he had complete massive organ failure from loss of blood. And eventually, the early hours of the morning, he passed away. The fact that I survived almost at Bruce's expense was on my mind all along. And, you know, I felt that by me getting away, the shark then went for him. Perhaps if I hadn't got away, it would have got me and he would have got away.
Shark attacks can not only involve almost unimaginable horror, but other strong emotions, even guilt. The best way, though, to avoid attacks is to understand sharks. And Gary Adkisson, veteran of more than 1,000 hours with the animals, says great whites are a lot like other large predators.
Sharks are lazy in the sense that their food source is generally the sick and the unhealthy and the infirm and the vulnerable. And so human beings, by virtue of our inadequacies in the marine environment, are easy, what would be considered an easy prey for a shark.
The shark that attacked Andrew and Bruce was showing classic behavior.
White sharks, for example, are ambushers, and they see a seal swimming over in silhouette. They'll ambush the animal, but by doing that, when they ambush the animal, they take off its propulsion primarily to incapacitate it, and then they go back and let the animal weaken and get tired before they'll take the risk of going feeding.
Just as a great white goes for a seal's tail or flippers, it targets a surfer's legs. Horrific stories about killer sharks stir primal fears. But can we be sure what a shark is always trying to do? Scientists are making surprising discoveries.
People have misconceptions about the animals as being a significant danger to humanity, and so they have a tendency to demonize and mythologize and do all sorts of things. The reality is very different.
An attack is an attack. The motive might not seem to matter, but it could, in fact, make a difference. The waters off Northern California, and commercial diver David Abernathy was about to go to work in an area with an abundance of great white sharks.
That area was known for supposedly resident great whites in that area, but they're an elusive animal. You don't see them when you're diving. I kind of figured that we kind of spooked them with all of our compressor and the anchors and all the noises and clanging and stuff, and I just figured like it would be like, you know, a deer in the woods or something that would just run away from the noises and stuff, you know, but on the contrary. I'm ready. The day of the accident, I was picking sea urchins. We weren't anchoring up, I was just jumping over the side with the boat drifting.
David was connected to the boat by an air hose. And despite all the disturbance that he assumed would deter sharks, a great white came to investigate. In fact, as David was to realize later, unusual noise doesn't scare big sharks. It actually attracts them, even from great distances.
When I surfaced, I'd spit my regulator out and was just getting ready to tell them, over here, throw the anchor, you know, and their eyes were huge.
What is that?
And I didn't know what was up, and then all of a sudden I just got hit from behind. First I thought it was a stellar sill or something that hit me, being territorial or something. And when I spun around to hit on it, it was this great white shark. I was just looking down the back of this thing, like on the top of a Greyhound bus or something, you know, that it was so big that it was not even like it was real or something, you know. And as he bit down, it caught my dive hose. He was lunging around trying to get me, but my hose was in his mouth. Every time he would lunge, the hose would pull tight, and so it would land up, I would land on his side. And the whole time the compressor was running, there was air pumping, he was gnawing on the dive hose, you know.
There was nothing his friends on the boat could do but watch in horror.
I felt really insignificant. Beating on it and everything, it was like just, you know, hitting on the side of a bus or something.
David was being dragged farther and farther from the boat until the hose reached its limit at about 150 feet, and the shark finally stopped.
Come and get me! Help!
But as his friends raced to rescue him, the hose slackened, and the shark could move again.
The shark coming back!
And then they turned the boat and started racing over where I was at, and the shark dove with me and pulled me under because the boat was coming at him.
As the shark dragged David deeper, the hose tightened again, and this time it snapped. David wasn't tied to the shark anymore, but the shark wasn't finished. It turned and charged toward the boat.
I thought I was dead, you know, I mean, I thought I was a goner. Even when, like, I was released and hit the surface and was treading, I just figured that he would jerk me down.
Where's the shark, Eddie? Okay. Eddie, you see him? Where is he? Eddie!
And he dove under the boat, and as he was filing under, I was just getting to the rail.
The shark coming back! Come on, come on!
The shark was coming fast, but David was so tired he could hardly move.
I had no strength to even pull my body up out of the water when I got to the rail. I was just exhausted because of the duration that this went on, you know, on the surface. And he started to make his turn when they pulled me onto the boat.
Come on!
Oh, I can't believe it. Oh, man. I'm whole. I had to keep looking at my everywhere on my body. You know, I just was amazed that I made it out of there without anything. I'm whole. I'm whole.
It's a miracle.
For a while there, I was like thinking that that was my time. My time was supposed to be then, and that I really was like just wandering around like not supposed to be here anymore, you know. I was supposed to be dead, and that kind of took the wind out of my sails, you know.
David had the shock of his life. His reaction isn't surprising.
I'd say I'm still pissed at this one. I'd still like to get revenge.
But what may be surprising is a possible reason for the attack. David was definitely ambushed, the same as a seal or a surfer. But when the shark first hit him, it didn't bite him, and he finally got away without a scratch. This could be pure luck, or something else.
Apparently, White Shark Society, we'd like to understand a lot more about it, but among other things, it involves aggression and hierarchy. Two animals may essentially establish a relationship where one is dominant over the other.
It's possible that by entering the shark's world, we also enter shark society.
Essentially, the animals doing the same sort of things when they're interacting with human beings as they do when they interact with one another.
Sharks could be seeing us not as prey, but as rivals, treating humans the way they'd treat other sharks. And when sharks compete, they punch.
In a competitive scenario, they did not bite each other because they could risk injury to one another. But instead what they do is mouth open punch each other. That shark viewed this gentleman exactly the same way as he'd do one of his own brethren.
So while David thought he was involved with a predator, he might actually have been pursued by a bully.
It's essentially saying, here I am. There's a check my teeth out. They're bigger than yours, or whatever.
As we learn more about sharks, we see that they're more than just mindless man-eaters. If we're going to avoid attacks by them, we need to understand how complex the animals can be. And the best way to do that is to examine the attacks themselves. The one, for instance, on a South African teenager. It was the Easter holiday, and the beaches were crowded with, from a shark's point of view, sitting ducks.
Hey, isn't that JP?
Everyone knew JP Andrew. He was a popular boy and had lived here most of his life.
We were in there for about an hour and a bit. And right before it happened, we'd actually been thinking, oh, you know, we're going to get out soon, go and have lunch or something.
Despite the fine weather, the water was a little murky. But Shona noticed something large and strange.
And I saw this thing kind of, it was a fin, it was a dorsal fin, and it kind of slipped under the water, like right next to me. Guys, there's something in the water.
Shona's friend JP had been attacked by a great white shark.
And it was like foam and blood and thrashing, and you couldn't see what was what and what was who. And I don't think it registered. I was in total disbelief. That's why I just sat there and stared. And I think I was just shocked.
I think that was a shark.
As everyone else vacated the water, one person ran the other way to rescue JP. shark had bitten off JP's leg. Blood had drained from his body.
6, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
People on the beach tried to resuscitate JP, but couldn't get his heart started.
I still can't get a pulse.
It appeared he'd already bled to death.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
But had he? In cases like this, there's a crucial 10 minutes between dying and reviving, and JP's story wasn't over yet. But why did the attack happen? Was there something about the water that made it more likely? Did JP lose his leg because the water was murky?
There's some simple key triggers to why an attack occurs, and one very simple one is clarity of the water. They can't see any better than you and I do. So if there's only a meter or less of visibility, that's what they see, just like us.
And they don't want an injury any more than we do. They don't want to take on something that can viciously fight back.
Sharks they're not risk takers. They don't want to get hurt. They're going to take their time, and if they don't understand what something is, they're not going to mess with it.
So when a shark in cloudy water sees only a vague shape, it has to test it somehow.
They can't flip or something to see what it is. Their hand is their mouth, and so they mouth it. He's got great taste buds in back of his teeth, so he can immediately determine whether or not it's something edible or on the food chain.
It was probably just trying to work out what kind of animal JP was.
They're so big and powerful, when they mouth something that they think it's a source of food, it's pretty devastating. The trauma is pretty devastating.
Cautious testing isn't part of our assumptions about a mindless killer. And it's not much comfort either to the object of the test.
I can't find a pulse.
By the time the ambulance arrived, JP had been given up for dead.
When he came out to water, JP was dead. He was dead.
Right, Brian, check for a pulse, please. Yeah.
You always think there's not much hope.
Mark, just make sure. I think I feel a faint pulse, but I'm not too sure, please.
Mario, please pull over. We need to check for a pulse.
Okay, right.
And then all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, he actually decided himself, I don't know how, but he got a pulse back.
Excellent, we got a pulse. Mario, you can continue again. Pass the phone to me, please.
But there wasn't much blood for his heart to pump. JP was still on the edge of death.
Right, we've got a 15-year-old male shark attack victim on Muizenberg Beach. He had his right lower leg amputated by the shark completely.
Did he have a lot of blood loss?
He's completely exsanguinated.
Just when the emergency team thought it was making some progress, JP's heart stopped again.
Hold on, he's arrested. Give me a CPR, please. Carry on ambu-bagging. Okay. Let's lower the bed. You seem to have a rhythm. You can stop CPR for a second. Has anybody spoken to the family?
When I heard about the attack, my first reaction was just screaming. I was basically screaming and panicking because I didn't know how serious it was at the time. When I saw him in the emergency room, he looked like somebody who's dead. His foot was sticking out under the blanket. He was covered in pipes. There was some blood on his face. And the emergency nurse told me afterwards that I touched his face and I gave him a kiss.
JP's heart was now beating all right, but he was still losing blood. He was rushed to surgery where Dr. Digby de Villiers was able to assess the full impact of the shark attack.
This particular shark bite injury consisted of a complete above-knee amputation about 7 centimeters below the groin crease, and it was a guillotine-type amputation in that it went straight through skin, muscle, and bone. There wasn't even a ragged edge. Okay, we're letting the cuff down. So what we were dealing with here was a patient who had huge blood loss, probably most of his blood volume, which happened in a very short time.
Several major arteries had been sliced through, and JP was simply bleeding to death. The surgeons raced to staunch the flow. The doctors did their best, but JP was still getting worse, and the most frightening prospect became a real possibility.
The pressure's been building on the brain, so we're expecting the worst at this stage, and we do need
that pressure could mean severe brain damage. Enough of it could kill him.
The worst for me was Easter Sunday when they told me they don't think he's going to make it. That was the final, you know, like somebody comes up to me and say, you know, spend as much time with him as possible because we don't think he's going to make it.
In an attempt to control the pressure, JP had to be kept in a medically induced coma, but the doctors feared the worst.
And at that point, I was very scared, and I went to his bed, and I basically said to him, if you're tired of fighting and you want to let go, it's okay.
All anyone could do now was wait and see if the pressure was going to subside. The trouble with analyzing shark attacks in order to learn how to avoid them is that someone always has to suffer first. But Craig Bovum, though he did suffer, could have fared a lot worse. His extraordinary story occurred in Cape Town on Christmas Eve, when Craig was diving for the main course in his family's Christmas dinner.
It was my brief to prepare the Christmas lunch and get it organized. And on that Christmas Eve, I decided I needed more lobster to feed my family for Christmas Day.
The water was warm and the visibility was poor. Ideal conditions for a shark attack.
I've always been quite scared of sharks, and we often pull small sharks up in our nets. And I've always wondered about the ones that couldn't fit in the net.
He didn't have to wonder much longer.
I was on my way up when I saw what I mistook for a whale above me.
It was no whale. It was a shark, and it was coming straight at him.
The shark came in closer to me and eventually ended up swimming parallel to me with its pectoral fin right under my chest, and I was trying not to touch it.
He had no idea what kind of shark it was, but while he was swimming alongside it, he had a chance to look it over.
And it was an unusually damaged shark. I'd never seen a very large shark before, but this particular specimen had a lot of scars. It was extremely close, and I was also trying to work out what to do, whether I should be aggressive towards it and whether it would then just react and bite me.
He faced the shark down for over 4 minutes. And then it swam away. Was it gone? Craig knew that was too much to hope for.
Then I really got scared because I didn't know if he was going to come straight out of the darkness and hit me. At that point, I saw the fin from about 20 meters away coming at me at speed. And I realized I was about to turn into his lunch, and I got very scared. I felt the water move underneath me, and he just launched right over my feet with this gaping mouth, half out the water, straight for my head. Ended up doing this, and it immediately clamped down hard on my arms with a sickening crunch.
So with both arms trapped in the shark's mouth, he was being pulled down and was on the verge of passing out.
In the next moment, I knew I was underwater. I was breathing seawater, and I was in the mouth of this huge animal. When I realized I was shutting down and getting close to death, that he started shaking me a bit, I woke up and realized I had to fight myself out of the situation if I ever wanted to see my kids. I became emotional about seeing my children again.
His only chance was to fight back.
I gave him a few knees in the gut, which he seemed to respond to, and then I banged him with my mask on his forehead. The mask came adrift, and I fought until I felt I could get my hand out, and I pulled on my right arm until it came out. And all I saw was that the stump of my arm, and I thought I'd left my hand in his stomach, and I said to myself, I can deal with this. I started working on the other one, and eventually he tore away from me.
Craig had pulled himself free. Now he had to beat the shark to shore. He made it, but he wasn't undamaged.
Well, I've lost most of the useful function of my right arm. I can't hold things really well. I can't hold a spanner or a screwdriver. I used to be an extremely able person.
But he still didn't know what kind of shark it had been. So he had his wounds analyzed.
The tooth impressions on my arm are very far apart, and that is basically how you can discern a great white's bite, is because its teeth are much larger than any of the other sharks. Mine have approximately 50 to 55 millimeter intervals between the center of the tooth, which, from what I've been told, would explain that this was a shark anywhere between 4.5 and 5.5 meters.
In fact, a great white that size could have torn him to pieces. It had enough strength in its jaws to crush metal, and it would have been no problem just to yank Craig's arms off. But it didn't do that. Why not? What do we need to know about shark psychology?
Quite often they give a bite that is minimal. That is, they can do a lot more damage, but don't. They can hold on and they can release you, and this is often the case. At least with the white shark, there's evidence that they have very fine control over this. There have been a few people that have been essentially grabbed very lightly by the sharks and just carried along for a bit and then released. They can just grip something without, even without their teeth going through it.
From Craig's point of view, it had been a desperate fight for his life. But how did the shark view it? Subduing Craig, eating him even, would have been a matter of a little more jaw pressure. But it didn't apply that. And when Craig struggled, it just let him go.
If you happen to be in its place, in its face, so to speak, and the animal is going to be assertive, one of the things it can do is use biting for asserting itself. It may be limited biting, but on the other hand, it's enough to possibly give you serious injuries, but not the sort of injuries if it actually completed its bite and really ripped at you, in which case it might tear you limb from limb.
Craig was lucky to be alive. JP was still alive, but still in a medically induced coma. For 10 days, the doctors battled to prevent brain damage. They finally brought the pressure on his brain under control, but by then it might have been too late. The only way to find out was to wake him up. Estelle, JP's mother, had to prepare herself.
I had to accept that the accident had happened and that I couldn't control it, I can't reverse it. And I think basically what I was thinking was I've just got to be strong and be there when he wakes up. So that kept me going, actually, yeah, knowing that I have to be there for him.
To try and get a response, Estelle played JP's favorite music. And after an agonizing wait, he stirred.
knew JP was going to be okay when he, at first, when his father was talking to him and saying, shall I sing for you? And because he had the tracheostomy in, he couldn't speak. And he was just like shaking his head and saying, no, no. And we just knew he's going to be okay.
He'd been clinically dead twice. He'd lost a leg and all his blood. And for 10 days had been in a coma, almost sure to have suffered brain damage. But his brain was fine. He did recover.
Everything about that whole, like, in hospital thing is very, very misty, you know, because they gave me a lot of drugs.
The horror of the attack was other people's horror. He himself can't remember.
Well, seeing as I lost all my blood, like, in the attack, apparently some of my brain cells died, and so I can't actually remember anything about the day except for crossing over the railway lines to go to the beach.
But perhaps the strangest part of JP's story is that 4 days after the attack, his leg was washed ashore, uneaten.
That JP's leg was not eaten suggests that the shark had other motives than predation in biting him. What these motives are can be contested, but on the other hand, they were not predation. They could be aggression. They could even be mistaken identity. They could even be play, you know. Maybe play for a white shark is, hey, let's chop his leg off or something like that. Who knows? But they're complicated animals. They're not simpletons that just simply bite people. So I think there's a bit of mystery there, but one thing that didn't happen was that JP was not eaten. Else his leg wouldn't have been recovered intact. Else he might not have been recovered intact. He might not have survived the tail.
As food, people just don't appeal to sharks.
The misnomer, I think, out in the public place is that people think that once you see a shark, you're on the food chain. Indeed, you're not. In fact, you taste pretty funky to a shark. Once they taste it, it's not their food source. It's not what they normally eat, and it tastes alien to them, and they'll spit it out. If you want an analogy, if you took dog food and made it look like the best dressing for Thanksgiving dinner, and you tasted it, you go, yeah. 90% or more of shark incidents are mistakes. They assumed we were something we were not.
But the fact that they've been randomly sampled and ultimately rejected doesn't make life any easier for the victims. Even the physically unscathed David Abernathy has psychological scars.
I mean, I had emotion roller coasters for a long time. Just, you know, I couldn't control my emotions. Started welling up, crying and stuff for, you know, over a commercial or something. You know, I mean, just I guess that's just what happens. You know, how your body deals with a bad experience. You know.
JP is coming to terms with having lost a leg. But it's too soon to know what the deeper effects might be.
His recovery has been really fast, and it's quite scary at times for me because it happened so fast.
So to keep reasonable fear from turning into phobia, JP and his mother are going to come face to face with a great white shark. With them is shark biologist Michael Scholl. They set the bait and wait for a shark. No one knows what JP's reaction will be. After 3 hours, a great white finally turns up.
Jeez. How big would you say that one is? That was amazing. That was so cool.
Individual sharks can be identified by the peculiarities of their fins. That's more than 1,000 just in this bay, but they come and go.
The sharks around here are not here for very long, so you've got new sharks coming into the area every day and sharks leaving again. False Bay is less than 100 kilometers away, Mossel Bay is less than 300 kilometers away. They can move between those bays within a matter of days.
Almost certainly, there's no such thing as a single rogue shark.
I don't think there's any resident white sharks anywhere really in the world. They all, in certain areas, they might stay longer than in others, but they all move out of the area after a while.
The shark that attacked JP is now probably far away from the scene. Chances are it was just passing through, and having done it once and not liked it, probably won't want to sample human flesh again. Neither it nor any other shark is a menacing, vengeful Jaws.
Well, now that I've seen them properly in the wild, they seem less threatening because, I don't know, they just have like a calmness to them. They don't look like they're, you know, hungry, looking for something to kill, you know. They look like...
Every day there are great whites around and thousands of people in the water. The minute number of attacks is evidence in itself that the sharks don't live up to their legend. What's left to do is to learn to better avoid attacks. Just 5 months after losing his leg, JP was back in the water.
There's some things that I just had to get over. Like I'll never be able to skateboard again, never be able to surf again. I won't be able to run or do any like physical activity like rugby, but I can still be in the water by bodyboarding.
Craig is now campaigning for responsible shark tourism. Andrew is still surfing in South Africa.
I'm ready.
And David is still diving in California. For these Sharkbite survivors, life is to be treasured.